Welcome to Kibaro Radio, broadcasting from Silver Spring, Maryland, in the United States of America. This is the Gambian Experience. I'm your presenter, Mohammed Lamin Silla. On the 18th of February, Gambians celebrate their independence from colonial rule. If the wind of change took the form of a hurricane in countries like Congo, Cameroon, Ghana, and the two Guineas of West Africa, in the Gambia it was a gently blowing wind that never was allowed to turn into breeze. Independence came to the Gambia on a silver platter, after only an experiment of 2 years self-government and with only a little wrangling between the two most dominant political parties, PPP and UP. At the London conference held between the Gambian delegation, drawn from different parties, and the British government, most of the Gambians rallied around the pro-independence agenda, shoving aside the ridiculous opposition to independence posed by Mr. P.S. Njai and his United Party. As a result, both the charismatic UP leader and his party were thrown to the dustbin of history. Coming fresh into the Gambian political history of the next 3 post-colonial decades was Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara, whose party, the People's Progressive Party, PPP, had managed to storm and take over the Gambian countryside, sweeping all the polls it had ever met and stamping the country's political landscape with his mild-mannered personality. The mildness of that imprint helped make the Gambia a showcase of multi-party democracy, peace, and stability. Today, we all know the Jammeh government is now operating in an atmosphere of illegality. The government is only civilian in name, but still operate as quasi-military form of administration with decrees overriding the national constitution. The government is operating without any respect for the provisions of the national constitution, the rule of law, or the fundamental human rights of the Gambian people. Furthermore, the Jammeh government is bent on flouting the laws and the norms of competitive party politicking and monopolizing all political power for themselves. The government has no respect for human rights and democratic liberties of citizens and depends on intimidation, extrajudicial execution, disappearances, torture, and political thuggery in order to perpetuate itself in power. To cap it all, corruption, plunder, and looting of the national cake is unprecedented in the history of the nation in modern world. Anytime I am trapped in conversation about our beloved country, one thing that sticks out is that we Gambians are very anxious to reform almost everything but ourselves, and the way we react to the national issues, the overall national agenda, is something to be desired. Apparently, this appears to be the main reason why some compatriots just do not have the courage to say things for fear of being labeled or seen as either unpatriotic or being anti-government or being anti-one ethnic group, while another group does not want to jeopardize its staff of benevolence. But if the socio-economic and political reforms needed to drag the Gambia out of the woods, we should all sit down and continue to analyze glaring contradictions at the heart of the ideology of hypocrisy that has become the favorite pastime of we Gambians. In this week's program, we are joined by Mr. Saul Saidykhan on the line from Virginia. Mr. Saidykhan, welcome to the Gambian Experience. It's a pleasure to have you on board.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Silla, thanks for the invitation.
Saul Saidykhan was born in Jara Kanikunda in Lower River region and now lives in West. What don't we know about Saul Saidykhan other than being a descendant of Mama Yoro Saidykhan, who hailed from Toro centuries ago?
Well, my most important title, the one that I'm most proud of, is that I'm a dad of 3 young kids who I try to raise to the best of my ability. I want them to grow up to be conscientious, to care for people who are less fortunate, people like my dad, people like my grandpa, people who don't have much in terms of worldly things, but have their character, have their uprightness, are very square-headed, and hopefully my kids would go on to emulate that tradition. I hope they would embrace them to grow into that sort of way, because that's what I cherish, that's what I value at this point in my life. It's not so much what you make, what titles you have, but how you conduct yourself and how you relate to people on a much global scale. You know, seeing the globe as your community, to do things to the dictates of your conscience, do the right thing, follow the right thing, say the truth, and try to live the proper way. On the professional side, I actually started off, contrary to a lot of perception, basically widespread perception. I actually studied business in school. I have an undergraduate degree in accounting and information systems, a double major. So when I got out of that system, I actually went first and it jumped into technology. You know, this was around 2000, and then, you know, the technology boom was coming on. So I went and I studied, network engineering. You know, so I became Microsoft certified, MCSC, and Cisco System certified, and A+ certified. And one of my hobbies used to be to buy computers cheap at source and then come and dismantle them, you know, take the motherboard out, replace it, you know, replace the BOS and things like that, you know, technical things. I used to do that just for fun, just so I can see if I, you know, spend my money well in trying to learn those sort of things. Now I can't do that just because my kids are now a lot more active than I am, and I'm a lot smarter too. So it's not easy to have computers open in the house. I no longer do those sort of things. I don't train them much. And in terms of professional life, I don't do much accounting. To put it in a nutshell, even though I am actually licensed as a public accountant. I'm a certified public accountant, which is the equivalent of the English ACCA. So in English terms, you would call me a chartered accountant, but my life professionally is basically one that has straddled the fence between technology and finance. So I basically go in and mine a lot of financial data. I mean, large financial databases, pull data, extract, look for trends, you know, create reports that basically recommends to my employer what we need to do, what they need to do to save money. And contrary to what is, for whatever reason, people think I'm in the humanities, and I'm not. You know, the last time I was in Gambia, a friend of mine, we went to a place to see some old friends, and this is one of my childhood friends, and we went there, and we got there was new people that I didn't know. You know, this is in Bundung, and he said when we got there, he said, "Hey," he said, "No, boy, that's my boy." He said, "You know, that's the writer." And immediately I felt very uncomfortable. I sat down and I said, "No." I sat there, and he kept talking, and so everybody was greeting and we were talking. But as I was sitting there, and I felt like a fraud because I know I'm not a writer. You know, it's just because you write commentary or article doesn't make you a writer. I mean, writing is a serious business. It's, you know, it tends to be a lot more serious than what I do. So I was sitting there, and I felt so uncomfortable that I said, "Hey," you know, I tried to clear the air to say, "Hey, no, actually I'm not a writer. I just comment. I, you know, write essays and things. Sometimes maybe I've written hundreds and hundreds of them over the last 15, 20 years, but I'm not a writer." When I said that, he told me to shut up. He said, "That's how we know you. You know, that's how we know you." So it's a Gambian thing there that people tend to, add 2 + 2 and get 5. So I try to clarify that just so that people are not misled as to what I am or what I mean, much of what I write about, it has to do with my passion for beliefs, try to stick to things that I believe in and call it things the way I see it. So that basically is lot cell is my grand picture, basically.
Thank you very much. In her presentation on TED.com, a Nigerian author, Ngozi,
yes,
emphasized the power of society telling its own story. She blamed Africans for allowing non-Africans to tell the African story.
Right.
Do you agree with this author? Are we also victims of single story or others telling our story in the way it fits them? People who don't even understand our culture, not to talk of our language. If so, what can we do as a people to remedy such situations?
Well, that's a good thing, and I actually agree with the lady. You were talking about Chimamanda Adichie. She's the young writer from southeastern Nigeria, the Igbo lady. She's right, but the deal is it's not just an internal issue. There's an external component of it, and both of them are important because what you have is the problem with having somebody else tell your story is they will without fail they will actually tell your story in the way that they want it told, and often that would not be something that you would like. I mean, the way they would tell your story is not something you would like. And one of the greatest failures we have as a people is that we have basically allowed others, mostly people with less than honorable intentions towards us, to tell our story. So that today, if you talk to most of us schooled Africans, the history that we will tell you about our countries are often through the lens of Europeans. And what has happened in the last 600 years, basically, is there has been, on a global scale, Eurocentrism, and history itself has been butchered in so many ways to reflect that mindset, to create that narrative that basically serves the European worldview, and it depicts them even where their behavior is very savage and very cruel to other people, indigenous people around the world. They portray themselves and they write their history in such a way that they come across as these benign people, these civilizing people, these people who have this civilizing effect on world history, where they go around the world basically saving people from themselves, the black and the brown, mostly the black and the brown, whether you're talking about India or Africa or, East Asia, so on and so on, or Latin America or so on and so on. I mean, there is, in so many ways, they've created narratives all around the world, most of which were basically based on lies. I mean, these are just manufactured. And so and some of them actually we know they are false, and they know they are false, and yet they maintain them. Like, for instance, you ask somebody today about America, and the first thing they will say is, it's discovered by Christopher Columbus. Even the people, these crazy right wingers in this country, in these United States, will tell you that's not true. If you challenge them, they will say, yeah, it's not true, but that's how it is. So in fact, they have something in history that is recorded that is false. Before Christopher Columbus came to America, to begin with, Christopher Columbus was just lost. The man was trying to go to India. He got lost. He hit an island. He basically in Hispaniola, and he was saved by native people. I mean, that man was literally saved from drowning by Indians, who not only did he not show any sort of appreciation for them. He later basically started what became their extermination. And when you go back before him, whether you're talking about the Nordic people, the Vikings, or whether you talk about Mansa Abubakar, the real name for the man is Batamandi Mori. Batamandi Mori is actually the man that Mansa Kanka Musa took from. Okay? In 1293, Batamandi Mori actually had he outfitted 2,000 canoes, and he crossed the Atlantic and came to America. Of course, he didn't know. He was just curious about what lies beneath the Baba on the west side of the Mali Empire. Okay, he sent an expedition. Those people never came back, and he said he's going to go. And these are documented by Arab historians. I mean, this is a trip that both Arab and Spanish historians have recorded. Today, if you tell people that they are shocked, well, you don't have to take my word for it. If you're interested in this, read, Ivan van Satima. He wrote this book, They Came Before Columbus. And if you read the book, it's not a very good read. It's not an easy read, because the book is so full of references that it stops your flow, it interrupts your flow. And the reason why Van Satima wrote this book with half of it just references is because he knows that to say something so unusual, to tell people, in this Eurocentric world that, hey, an African king, 200 years before Columbus actually sailed the Atlantic and came over to America. That very idea is so radical that he knew that they were going to tear him to pieces until he supplies them insurmountable evidence, and that's why his book is so full of references. And those are just two issues on the external side. Even on the internal side, we have these issues where in every single African country there is always some group. I don't know why this is the case, but they tend to be, we tend to have ethnic groups who, for whatever reason, believe because of their association or the way they see Europeans, they feel they are better than everybody else in the country. It's a very unfortunate thing, but this is a widespread problem in African society itself. So that this single story that Ms. Adichie was talking about is very important there, because what you have is it stops the genuine debates from happening on national issues. She's from Nigeria, so let's talk about Nigeria. If you're familiar with Nigerian history, you have heard of this phrase. There's a House of Fulani. And they never, people from eastern Nigeria, the southern Nigeria, they will tell you this. They say, House of Fulani, they never stop their House of Fulani. No, they say, the phrase is, they think they are born to rule. And then when you hear that thing, it jolts you. You say, hey, wait a minute, what do you mean? You say, oh, and I have a lot of friends from southern Nigeria who tell me this. Igbo and Yoruba people, they say, oh, you're that Fulani, Hausa people, they think they are born to rule. That's there. And I said, but who said that? Well, the deal is no one ever said it. But this is a narrative. It is a narrative that got started by Odumeka Ojukwu. Ojukwu, the colonel who declared the state of Biafra in 1966, proclaimed the state of Biafra, and went on to promote himself to general because he didn't like Jabu Gown and that even though he himself was born in the north, he in order to mobilize the Southerners to rally them to his cause, he coined this phrase that the House of Fulani think they're born to rule, and that we are because they don't want to let an Igbo be president of this country. So we have to break away from the rest of Nigeria and form our own state. And so today, that narrative, that House of Fulani narrative, is so powerful in Nigeria, so destructive in Nigeria, that it has made it virtually impossible for Nigerians to actually discuss genuine national issues. Part of the reason currently they have this Goodluck Jonathan there as president. He's an Ijao from the south of the country, the Niger Delta thing. This man is one of the most incompetent people that has ever taken any country in Africa. Just completely. And yet, in the last election, if you follow the result, it was so outrageous. Some of the results were so outrageous that you cannot even talk about it, how ridiculous it is. Because they immediately turned the election between the Northerner and the South. It's a Northerner, South, they turned it a North-South issue. Oh, this House of Fulani, the people that were running against him, people like Muhammad Buhari. Muhammad Buhari is the cleanest human being alive. That is one of the most honest people that you have ever heard of. He's the only Nigerian military leader who never promoted himself. He was a major general when they selected him to head the coup d'etat that replaced Sekou Shagari in 1983. When he left 18 months later, when he was toppled in a palace coup by Ibrahim Babangida, he was still Major General. He flat out refused to do it. And Buhari is so clean that even his arch enemies, like, Obasanjo and people like that, they to this day will swear that man is just is the only reason they didn't like him. They would say is because the man you couldn't compromise him. He was the man that you just couldn't compromise. Well, Buhari was running against Goodluck Jonathan, and they turned it into a northern-southern issue. It was a House of Fulani against somebody else. It's just a ridiculous thing. Nigeria has had 13 rulers in the last in the last 50 years, since 1960 to now. Okay, only 5 of these 13 are actually House of Fulani. A lot of people don't understand. Even Nigerians, they tend to assume that anybody from the north is House of Fulani, which is not true. Okay, so they started off with Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. Well, Tafawa Balewa, is true that the man who selected him to be leader of Nigeria was none other than Sardauna, Amadou Bello. Amadou Bello was the premier of the northern area. He was based in Kano. He didn't want to come to Lagos. He personally selected Tafawa Balewa, who is Kanuri, to be the prime minister. Okay, we know Balewa was, of course, when the coup happened in 1966 and the coup failed, the 5 major coup, quote unquote, Aguiyi Ironsi, who is Igbo, took over. Aguiyi Ironsi, of course, he didn't stay long because there was a counter coup in July of 1966. Aguiyi Ironsi took over in January of 1996, and by July of 1966, there was a counter coup, in which the northern officers came. The coup itself was actually planned by the prince of all northern officers, Murtala Muhammad. Him and Martin Adam actually planned that coup, and they were, quote unquote, adjusting to circumstances. Because what happened is they were delaying. The coup leaked, and the southern officers knew about the coup. They confronted Murtala about the coup, and Murtala was wavering. Murtala, of course, in typical style, never. He was a man who never broke nonsense. He said what he wanted to say, and so. But in any case, some young soldiers heard about this, and before you know it, they started shooting the Igbo officers, and the coup. Martin Adamu and Murtala Muhammad had to rush and push their plan out. In a matter of hours. The man who arrested Ironsi was none other than Yakubu Danjuma, Theophilus Danjuma. He was actually the secretary to the head of state, to Ironsi, and he was with the man in Ibadan with Colonel Fajui when he received the call from his boy Murtala that they were ready to move because the young soldiers have already started killing the Igbo officers. They are Igbo senior officers, so they better move. And of course, then this is how that coup came about. Murtala, of course, unfortunately, he also took over, and he only lasted 7 months, literally 7 months. 7 months to the day he took over took power. He was assassinated by Colonel Dinka. The man the nonsense man who was drunk. He carried the coup when he was completely drunk. He was the friend of Major Babangida, because it was Danjuma. Danjuma asked this Babangida to go and get that foolish man at Radio Nigeria, who was talking on the phone as drunk. Dinka was talking crazy on Radio Nigeria, and Danjuma told Major Babangida, Ibrahim Babangida, to go and arrest him, because that's his boy. Dimka and Babangida used to hang together. They were womanizing and drinking and everything. They were doing all that thing together. So it was Babangida, who went and talked to his boy Dimka to give up and allowed Dimka to sleep and go. And Dimka actually was arrested 2 days later with a prostitute in the Niger Delta, what is present-day Calabar. And so there was Murtala Muhammad. But I'm just giving you a narrative of the leaders they've had so far. They've had a Kanuri man, Tafawa Balewa. They had an Igbo man, Aguiyi Ironsi, and now they have this House of Fulani again. House of Fulani leader who is Murtala Muhammad. Murtala Muhammad was succeeded by Olusegun Obasanjo. He's Yoruba. Olusegun Obasanjo, was replaced. He handed over 1979 to Segun Sagare, who's House of Fulani. Good. 5 years later, in 1983, Sagare was replaced by Muhammad Buhari, a Fulani House of Fulani. And 18 months later, Buhari was replaced by Ibrahim Babangida. Babangida is an interesting case because he is actually Buhari. But culturally, his house, because he was born and bred in Minna, which is in the north, Niger State, present-day Niger State. And of course, Hiba Banjira was there for 8 years, and then, he handed over to Anna Saidykhan, who's Saidykhan is Yoruba. Saidykhan, of course, was removed by a Kanuri man named Sani Abacha. Sani Abacha, we all know, was replaced by Abubakar, Abdul Sami Abubakar, who again was replaced by Obasanjo. Obasanjo now was replaced by Umaru Yar'Adua, and Yar'Adua has now been replaced by Goodluck Jonathan. So if you're talking about out of the 13, only 6 are House of Fulani, and yet the narrative that they have today in Nigeria of the House of Fulani has these people who think they own the country and they are born to rule is still a very big, it's most divisive thing in Nigerian politics. They cannot. It has basically been a roadblock to the genuine discussion of political characters in Nigeria, and this is very instructive. And I'm saying this because we have the same thing in Gambia. This is something that most Gambians are loath to tell you this, but you know this. If you understand anything about why there is such an impasse between the small parties in Gambia, opposition parties, and the larger UDP party, it's the same narrative. Because what you have has the House of Fulani, they are born to rule in Nigeria. In Gambia, is called Maninka people. They think they own the country. It's the exact same thing. I'm sorry to tell you this, or if this is some sort of.
Mr. Saidykhan, we will come to the Gambian situation.
Yes.
But as you are aware, a country cannot make a meaningful development without its people knowing where they come from.
Yes.
As someone who is conversant with the history of the Gambia in particular and Africa in general, can you walk us through what activities happened before the Gambia became independent? What was life under colonialism in a nutshell?
Well, the simple truth is, what was happening in Gambia was not in isolation. It formed part of the broader tapestry of what colonialism was about across Africa. It's just a horrible experience, and we can run through this. Just overall give an overview of what the colonialism meant in the continent. You start in north, and we can take sample countries like Algeria. It's a very good example. The French, like they did everywhere else, basically saw their colonial territories as an extension of France. And they never want to leave. They just never wanted to leave. But when they started suffering defeat in Indochina, and the Battle of Bienpenfu especially was basically a turning moment in their colonial history. So they basically had to retreat. Because despite all the brutality that they were meting out on the people, they were kicked out of Vietnam effectively. And, so they started looking for last dance. In Lebanon was the same issue there. So when in Algeria, basically literally between 1954 and July 1962, when Algerians took over their independence, over a million Algerians were butchered by the French just so they can sustain this crazy system of colonialism, which is nothing but exploitation. That's north. You come down a little bit. You come down a little. You can go to Democratic Republic of Congo. The Zaire. King Leopold of Belgium basically declared that country to be his private domain, and he basically just turned that country. He turned the country, the people in the country, the entire country have people who are just there to serve his interests. And this guy went on to kill, and the lowest estimates, according to the United Nations' own figures, is over 10 million people were killed, literally by this man, between 1885 and 1909. Okay? Just imagine that, and this is you and accepted actually. And if you look at what the Congolese historians are writing about this. Actually, there's actually three extra million people that the UN people are not even reporting. So, Congolese historians believe up to 13 million people were killed directly by that man because of his policies. And the same Belgians, we all remember what happened in Rwanda just in 1994. People talk about Rwanda. Well, and the deal is, what happened in 1994 was nothing but the blow up of what had been building up the previous 150 years. Because basically what you have the Hutus and you have the Tutsis. The Hutus are 85% of the population and Tutsis are 15% of the population. Well, the lopsided nature of that arrangement is because the Tutsis are newcomers. The Tutsis are actually Ethiopians. They just migrated there like 150 years ago, like I said. Now, when they, if you've ever met an Ethiopian, and you know many of them, they are lighter skinned than most of us Bantu Africans. They tend to have aquiline features. They tend to have hair that grows longer than us. So when these Europeans, these Belgians got to Rwanda and Burundi, what is today Rwanda and Burundi, they immediately noticed the difference between the physical statues of the Tutsis and the Hutus. And wouldn't you know it, in typical Machiavellian style, they took this whole concept of divide and rule to a whole new level. They had a policy that basically says a Tutsi will have a different type of ID card than a Hutu. And that ID card entitles that Tutsi to privilege. Okay? And they because when the Tutsis they came with their chieftaincy and they made their, they had a paramount chief, basically a king. That king, that Tutsi king, was not just the king of the Tutsis, but the whole of the country. So that basically these Hutus, who are 85% of the population, became nothing more than, they call them Agusi, which is laborer, like somebody who's not fit for anything but menial work. And these people basically became serfs to these Tutsis who are Ethiopians. That of course we know how that culminated in the sort of bloodletting that we saw. And you go further down south, you look at what is presently Namibia, Southwest Africa. What the Germans did there from 1884 to 1915, horrible things. The Herero and Namakwa people, who formed the majority of what is today Namibia, were nothing but the experimental animals for what happened in Europe between 1940 and 1945 by the Nazis. Every single thing that the Nazis did in Germany, in Europe, everything they did to the Slavic people, everything they did to the East European Slavs, everything they did to the so-called Gypsies, everything they did to the Jews was basically practiced in Namibia. Every single thing they did. These people are so barbaric, they literally kill hundreds of thousands of people. The way they did it was very simple. They started this wonderful idea. I mean, and this shows you how brutal colonialism is. They basically came down and said they would go to Silakuna and say, and then gather all the cattle they can find, all the sheep they can find, all the livestock they can find, and say this belongs to the German nation because this is our colony, this is us. And when the people protested, they said, okay, if you said this is you, now you have to prove that this is yours. And the way you prove it is the European way. You have to show them a document, which they know never existed because our people don't write. They asked people to show them documents to prove that they own the cattle that they were seizing from them. So because of this sort of nonsense, the people, of course, naturally, did what any man, self-respecting person will do, and they protested. When they protested, these Germans started moving their troops, literally sent 20,000 troops there to basically go and massacre people. They had them in internment camps. They took them into internment camps and started basically experimenting, doing the test run for something that they were going to replicate 40 years later in Europe. So when you study the Nazi crimes in Europe, you come across terms like Lebenstraum, Konzentrationslager. These are all things that they were using back then in Namibia. And just to give you a viewpoint, and this wasn't so secretive. And this is another thing about colonialism, because when this was going on, there were actually reports in Europe itself. Caspar Eriksson, a man, a journalist that was so offended by what was going on. He spent 4 years, from 1904 to 1908. This man basically went to document what the Germans were doing. He was alerting Europe to wake up to what the Germans were doing in their so-called colony in Namibia. And nobody paid attention because these are just, animals that are disposable. Well, when they pulled the same thing off in Europe, all of a sudden, people act like this was a big surprise. And that, of course, is just part of the story. And this would take a lot of time to delve into and give details, but it's just horrible. So Gambia's picture, and I was going to say something about Cecil Rhodes, who gave himself the name of the three countries we have in Southern Africa today that we call Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Zambia. That whole that entire region was claimed by Cecil Rhodes to be his personal property. I mean, in the colonial document, the historical books, they have it recorded. They would say that Rhodes acquired it in 1890. In 1893, he acquired it. And how the hell do we acquire somebody else's country?
That's quite interesting.
And so the so-called Southern Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, the Northern Rhodesia / Nyasaland, is actually Malawi and Zambia today. Cecil Rhodes is not only criminal. King Lubengula, who was the main sovereign in that area, this man would go, Mr. Sila, he would go draw up a contract in English, go take some trinkets to our chiefs, and go there and say he's there on a peace mission, and then he would ask he would ask the chief that he just wants a small patch of land around the village, and these people would sign, and he would tell them to sign. Well, the chief didn't know that when he wasn't talking about a small patch of land around the town. No, he was talking about the entire country. So he later insisted that these people actually ceded the country to him. This is the Rhodes Rhodes Scholar. He was the guy that set up that Rhodes Scholar thing. And even there, in his will, he was very specific about what he was doing. He basically said that he is a believer in imperialism, and that people of Anglo-Saxon descent are gifts from God that basically should go around and turn the rest of the world into their ways, because they are more civilized and they are more cultured than everybody else. This is why, like Bill Clinton was a Rhodes Scholar, so was Susan Rice at the UN now, and, Rachel Maddow, people like that, they are all Rhodes Scholars. And then he allows, German students also to do, because he said Germany and the English people will march someday, So these are the sort of things that they had, and of course, in much later day, in the 1960s, they had Winston Field, who was the head of the Tubab regime in so-called Zimbabwe. In 1962, they basically declared that they are going to be an independent nation, when Smith started understanding that this was not something tenable. And he started talking about compromising with the blacks. He was quickly removed by his deputy, Ian Smith. Ian Smith, we all know, this is the same Ian Smith who went on to do horrible things. And in 1994, between 1994 and 1997, when they had the Truth and Reconciliation Committee here in South Africa, we had apartheid agents went to that commission, and they confessed that Zimbabwe was actually the laboratory of apartheid South Africa. They were actually developing chemical weapons, biological weapons in South Africa, and they were giving it to Ian Smith's government in Zimbabwe to test on black people in Zimbabwe. This went on. They were basically, now that if you think back to what was happening in the 70s with 10,000 people suffering from anthrax and, this cattle disease and so on, I mean, these people have been directly infected. They were being deliberately infected by these colonialists just to maintain that system. So when you come back home, Gambia was in so many ways, we had it much easier, not because of an accident, because there really wasn't much to fight over. So the colonialists didn't see any need to kill so many Gambians, so many of our people, in order to maintain a country where, other than fishing and the river, there really wasn't much to fight over. So this is why our transition to democracy wasn't as traumatic as most of our sister African countries. But even in Gambia, just like in every other country, there were parts of, the colonial areas, so-called colonial areas, where the Tubab live, where an African couldn't go at certain parts of the day or night. You just couldn't go. If you go, you were going to be arrested, and you were going to be, locked up for being a vagrant. This is in our own country, and so in the Gambia's case, when this agitation for independence, and of course here credit goes to Mr. Small, Edward Francis Small. There's a lot of credit to him there. Many people tend to exaggerate his popularity and his power has a symbol, but he was a good symbol. He doesn't have the following that some historians, some of our characters, some of the writers in Gambia make him out to be. He wasn't. And just to give you a demonstration of how little power Mr. Small had, just remember this. If you read Doyle Forea and their politics and some of these writers who write about government, they will tell you that, Edward Francis Small, he formed the cooperative union, he formed the farmers cooperative to help the farmers to bargain and stuff. That is bold. It's not true. He tried. Here's the deal. He had the intention of forming a cooperative union. The point is, you cannot form a cooperative union in the colony, because there are no farmers in the colony. There's no farmers in Banjul and Serekunda. The farmers are in the protectorate. In the protectorate, you have to get out to the farming areas. Well, Edward Francis Small in 1953 actually left Banjul to go to North Bank, Balangar, which way he's familiar with, to set up a cooperative union. Well, before the man could say Nangen left, they parked him. The colonial government had him arrested in 1953, and they transferred him to Banjul immediately, and they dumped him in Banjul. Okay, so that was the beginning and the end of that whole cooperative thing. You read for it, they say he formed the cooperative union. Is nonsense. He had the intention of forming it, but when he tried to actualize it, the colonists got him and they dropped him in Banjul. In 1950, they just arrested him and had him shipped back. And nothing happened. Nothing happened because he didn't have the following. Well, why did he not have the following? Were no people in Banjul at the time? Of course, there are people. But here is the ugly part of the government policies. And this is why it irritates me when I read some people, and which is a very common thing, where you read these fly-by-night historians that we tend to have too many of, who basically manufacture stories based on their feelings and not the facts of what actually transpired. Because the truth of the matter is, the Gambian, we started off on the wrong footing. Francis Small, he doesn't have much education. He only had high school education. That's the first thing. But beyond that, this man was an Aku. And Aku were only 10% of the population. Now, when we started forming parties, to agitate, and of course when he started talking about it from 1917, he is by personality a hothead. I mean, he has a tendency to, speak when he's not supposed to speak, when, to say things that he's not supposed to say. Because after he went to school in Sierra Leone and, he came back to Gambia, he decided to be a priest, to join the missionary thing. They sent him to Balangar, and of course he was there within 18 months. He didn't even last 2 years. He had a big problem with a white merchant in the town, because he likes to ring the church bell at the wrong hour, and those people didn't like it. And Francis Small, of course, they call it the Balangar incident, and this is what the incident was. There's a white merchant in Balangar who told him not to ring the bell early in the morning, and Small said he will ring it anytime he wants, and the white man said, "Oh, you're talking to me like that?" And before you can say 1, 2, 3, Small punched him, and they fought. And of course, so when the British commissioner came around and heard about the story, he told his boss, Small's boss, that he has to withdraw this man. He has to take him out of Balangar immediately, and they did. The Mr. Toys, the innocent Akuman, that guy got him from Balangar and took Mr. Small to Sukuta, Kombo Sukara, and of course he was there. And because Small regarded Mr. Toy as nothing but a wimp, he said so. He was saying so publicly that this man is, he bungled because of the Tubal and so on and so on. And Mr. Toy, of course, went on to dismiss Small. And Small, of course, from that point on, he any sort of organization that he had about, he joined. The Renters Association, the Gambia. I mean, he went on to play a part in organizing a labor movement that would Protestants, and of course by 1920, when English-speaking West Africans started talking about self-determination. Small money to convince people in the Aku community to chip in, to try and help him with some money. They contributed, and he was able to raise. They were able to raise enough money for him to sail to Ghana to give a speech to that effect. So, and of course, when he came back in 1942, he was elected to the advisory. It's an advisory legislative council. They don't have any power. All they can do is recommend things to the colonial government, and he did that. And of course, but by then, by 1947, the Banjul Wolofs were producing their first batches of educated people, and of course his nemesis became Gaba Jahumpa, none other than the father of Fatu Jahumpa, and so on and so on. And Jahumpa, of course, is very critical of Banjul Wolofs of that time. I mean, it's a big time travelist, and the way he did it was a very sneaky way. It's just a wink way of doing it, because he formed the group. His group that he formed, the so-called Muslim Congress, was nothing but an euphemism for Wolofs, because in those days what you had in the so-called colony, which is Banjul and Bakaw, Kombo St. Mary's area, 99% of Aku people were the Christians, and 99% of Wolof people were Muslim. So if you want to get rid of Mr. Silla as a Christian, all you have to do is as an Aku, all you have to do is this is a Muslim thing. You turn it in, instead of telling people point blank that this is Wolofs against Akus. We're tired of Aku people dominating us. We don't want an Aku to represent us. You just turn it into a religious thing, which is what Mr. Jahumpa did, and he was very effective in disarming Mr. Small. The Gambian historians, for whatever reasons, tiptoe around this, and they act like something else happened, but this is exactly what happened. They just basically disarmed this guy because he was Aku, and to show you how powerful this thing was, because all of the parties that they had there, JC5 started it off. The Reverend JC5 started off forming parties there in 1951. He, of course, with Small and Mama Tamba Jammeh were appointed by the English Crown 2 times to be the representatives on the so-called advisory executive council for Gambia, in 1951, in 1953, and so on and so on. But JC5 started that thing off, and then others followed suit very, very, very quickly. In a matter of 6 years, we went from no parties to having 5 of them, at the same time, because JC5 formed it, and Jahumpa had this Muslim Congress thing going on, and then this St. Clair Juve, another Aku fellow, formed one in 1954, and he, of course, didn't last any longer than the election cycle, because he lost the election, and he died literally within a month of that. And that basically was, they had literally 4 parties in Banjul, formed by Banjulians. The funny thing is, when you read Gambian political history, nobody tells you that tribalism has anything to do with those 4 parties in small Banjul. I mean, the entire population of Banjul in 1965 was 30,000. How the hell do you have 4 parties in a town that's only 30,000 people? And of course, this is very interesting. Akus, of course, their fortunes went down with the increased representation that Wolofs had in the population. And of course, like I said, when you read the stories, from that era, it's all basically camouflaged into these idyllic environment where everybody was going about espousing patriotic ideas, and so it was no such thing like that going on. It was a tribal thing, and they got rid of the Aku Angles. And of course, by 1959, when they started talking about having genuine democracy by allowing every single person in the country to vote, that's when Pasanjali, Kewakotoro Njane, Famara Wasature, and they went behind to talk to Fature Sanya and people, old people like that. Sanjali went around the country to mobilize our country folks to rally behind and get their own candidates to speak for them in the coming era, because there was this hope that the new era that is to be ushered in a year later by the new constitution that was being touted would give people universal suffrage, would allow everybody in the country to have a say in what was going on.
Mr. Saidykhan, this brings me to the idea of the London conference held between the Gambian delegation drawn from the different parties and the British government.
Yes.
And most of the Gambians rallied around the pro-independence agenda, shoving aside the ridiculous opposition of independence posed by P.S. Njai and his United Party. And as a result, the charismatic UP leader and his party were thrown to the dustbin of history. And then coming first into the Gambian political history for the next 3 decades, post-colonial, 3 decades of post-colonial Gambia, was Sadaudo Kairaba Jawara, whose party, the People's Progressive Party, as you have mentioned, had managed to storm and take over the countryside, sweeping all the polls. It had met, and I mean, walk us through that. What happened?
Actually, here, Minister, be careful. The point is, it's only a minority. You have to understand, it was only the PPE that was saying flat out that the Gambia ought to go for independence, like Ghana, like Guinea-Conakry, and so on. Even Jahumpa actually had this wonderful idea. You would not believe this. Jahumpa actually said the Gambia should be like Malta. Well, what happened in Malta? Malta basically, instead of having independence, they actually agreed to have, to send representatives to the English cabinet as observers, just like you have now in the United States. People from Guam and Puerto Rico, they don't have any real votes, but they can send people to Congress just to be there. Just people say that he's president. You see what I'm saying? Jahumpa actually had that idea. You would not believe that was his idea of where we should be. Peña was flat out. Peña was flat out against it. He said the country is not prepared, blah blah blah. And not only that, that's just the nice side of it. The other side of it, he was actually talking to Senegal. I can show you documents where he was in Parliament. He was actually giving a speech on the eve of Gambians independence, and he was talking about what the Senegalese interest was, what Senegal wanted to see, and so on and so on. I mean, ridiculous stuff. So it's you have to understand. It's very sad. Because it's in Gambia. I don't know what's happening, because when you tell things like they are, people jump up and down, because for some reason there is this crazy craving for everyone to engage in this false equivalency. If you say that Jawara fought for independence, you have to say that Peña fought for independence. Otherwise, you are tribalist. This is nonsense. Listen, let's talk about what Jawara did wrong, what Peña did wrong, what Jawara said, what Peña said. Each to his own. This is my way. The idea of embellishing stories just to make it look like somebody is what he is not, to me, is not only phony, but is a complete disservice to history. Okay, it's a complete disservice to history. That man to begin with, let's talk about Peña the person. This is the real truth. This man was a lawyer. Okay, he comes from Salem. Okay, he came to Banjul. He went to school in Banjul. Him and his brother Sirif and so on. he became holier than the Pope. He is by nature an impossible man to deal with. He's too arrogant, he's too haughty, he's impossible. But worse than all of those, he was at the personal level a very dishonest person. He makes up stories that have nothing to do with reality, and these are documented. Okay, and one of the things I like to do is to say things because somebody people can say whatever they want to say as long as they won't dare to come out and challenge, because then I'll bury them with evidence. But what you had, this man was a lawyer even when he had his law certificate. He was actually stealing money from his clients, which was why the colonial government, not Jawara's government, the colonial British government, the same governor, Governor John Paul, the guy that appointed him in 1960, because John Paul was mad at Jawara, okay, for asking for full independence. Not he wanted Jawara to delay, to say that Gambia somehow was not ready, and that to keep the status quo in Gambia. And this man was so mad at Jawara for writing a manifesto, an independent manifesto, calling for what his wife's uncle, the Edward Francis Small is actually the uncle of Jawara's wife, Rasta Mahoney, his first wife. And Jawara, for writing that manifesto, became an enemy of Governor John Paul. And because of that, this is precisely why in 1960, this John Paul, just to spite Jawara, when the election happened in 1960, PPP had eight seats, UP had 7 seats, okay? How can you take a party that won less electoral seats than another party, and you take the one that actually lost in terms of electoral, and you appoint the head of the losing party based on this ridiculous excuse that the nominated chiefs had supported the loser. Well, these are just nominated. They are nominated after the fact. They are nominated only when there's an established government by whoever is in charge. So any sort of their support of a loser gives that loser no more weight than he gained at the polls. This was, and if you think Jawara's argument in 1960 is stupid, well, guess what? It's the same thing that happened in Britain just 2 years ago. Cameron is Prime Minister of the UK, not because he won outright, but because he had the largest number of absolute votes, and the second person says, elections should have consequences. People went to the polls and said, hey, this Cameron guy, has more votes than the Labour Party one. Well, even though ideologically he was more, the Social Democrats are more in tune with the Labour Party, the man feels that he would somehow bastardize the whole idea of the British people at the polls by supporting the Labour candidate. That's what happened in Britain 40 years after what Jawara was saying. So if you read some of these Gambian nonsense writers that go and write these sort of ridiculous stories trying to justify what Governor Paul did in appointing Penjai as chief minister in 1960, just remember this. The British politicians, the British system somehow is what we inherited, and why are they doing the same thing? The same argument that Jawara was given in 1960 for resigning as education minister is the same reason that the Social Democrats gave in the UK for siding with the Conservative Tory party in having their man become Prime Minister of the UK. And this is very instructive because if you're looking at the political situation of any country, it is very important to look at the people that are running for office. And this is where I was telling you about the power of the narrative, because the narrative, when the narrative gets corrupted, in either by ethnic sentiment or by some other reason, it becomes impossible to separate the chaff from the wind. Because what you have here is you have a person who, at the personal level, had no business being put in charge of a public dominion. He just didn't have that character. I mean, this is a lawyer. I mean, listen, man, these are basic ethical rules. You do not take money from your clients. This man was actually caught doing that, and the Buckley Rice actually in his book basically gave out this case, and a senior colonial officer actually told Rice that they were going to put this man in jail. They were going to put that Pendia in jail, if not for the fact that at the time that they had all the documents assembled, he was the prime minister. All they did was to get his license, to remove his license, and they took his license away and never gave it to him. So when you're talking about, it's not just his problem with conniving with Senegal to do some other things and going around Banjul and spreading these horrible tribal narratives that today are still with us. Yeah, because what you have is much of what Yahya Jammeh says. A lot of people, and this is why I try to stay away from Gambians, because for whatever reason, the culture of telling truth, it has now become something of a dying institution in the country, because people will howl insults at the Yahya and say, "Let me tell you something. I'm sorry, Mr. Silla, but see, most of what Yahya Jammeh is saying now, most of what when he goes on the political platform and singles out an ethnic group, insulting them and so on, let me tell you, everything Yahya Jammeh is saying, nothing he is saying is original. Everything he's saying is something that Pendia used to say openly. The problem with Jawara, and this is one of his biggest failures, is Jawara never understood the power of the narrative. There are things when people say, let me tell you, Mr. Silla, if people are waking up, if you are in a college campus where people are by nature forced to research things they hear, okay, if somebody comes and says Mr. Silla is a witch, don't worry about it, because in a college campus, people are going to go and dig and find out whether it's true that Mr. Silla is a witch. But when you live in a country where most people are either illiterate or semi-literate, if somebody says Mr. Silla is a witch, I swear to God, you better say something. If you don't, they are going to crucify you. They will butcher you for being a witch. This is part of the problem of Jawara. Pendia's narratives they've taken on a life of their own, because you know what? For a very long time, nobody challenged them. It became fait accompli. When people said it, there are a lot of things you can rattle out, a lot of anti-Manigo things, and these are things that everyone has had 1 million times. They've had it so often and so unchallenged that people take it that it must be true. If it is so widespread, and yet it has nothing. It has nothing to do with reality. It's not rooted in facts. He says it because he likes to say it, and since the people, the ones that had the bully pulpit, who had the opportunity to challenge and decipher people that, hey, this is not true, this is what's happening, never did so, they have basically now become part of folklore. So Gambia, of course, is a country of 1 million, urban legends. People just sit down and either build up, a phony character into something that he's not, or they tear down somebody who actually deservedly should not be appended. So this is part of.
Yeah. So apparently, anytime I'm trapped in a conversation about our country, the Gambia,
yes,
one thing that sticks out is that we are very anxious to reform almost everything but ourselves.
Yes.
And the way we react to things or the overall goal of developing our country is so ridiculous that sometimes, our disagreement slide into moral blame and dangerous, disturbing, instinctive intolerance, as well as politics of disgust instead of unification of ideas that will effect changes that strike. That gives me, a lot of sleepless nights when I looked at the Gambian society. Hypocrisy is now becoming our pastime.
Yes, it is. It is, and what part of the problem is, we really have multiple problems, because it's not just general ignorance. There's part of it is there's deliberate distortion of facts by people. There are people in the country who, for whatever reason, really don't see anything wrong with just saying how they want the country to be, not how it is, or portraying things as they were, not how they liked it to be. You see what I mean? These are different. There's a key difference. If you're going to state an opinion about what you want something to be, that's fine. This is your opinion. That's what you want it to be. But if you're talking about something that happened historically, or how we can affect a certain amount of change, do not base that on, because part of the impasse between the opposition groups in Gambia, in so many ways, is at the core, is a false bargain. Okay. Because what you have, opposition party. Well, these opposition parties, they are not equal, okay? And one of my favorite philosophers is the Greek Saint Thomas Aquinas, and I read his works, and one of the things that he said that stays with me, that will never go away, is he said equals. Or people need to be treated to their degree of equality or inequality. Okay? He said, in other words, he said to treat equals unequally is an injustice, or to treat unequals equally is an injustice. So if you are talking of a party that has 10,000 people, has its base, you're comparing that to a party that only has 1,000 people, has its base, and you somehow, for whatever reasons, you want to insist on treating them as the same. You are by dint, being unfair. Okay. The simple truth of the matter is, if you look at DOI, you look at this UDP, you look at Ahmad Bas Party. If you look at their support base, you would see a clear trend. Okay. And in my honest opinion, I don't believe that some of the vitriol that gets thrown at Hussein Dabo has anything to do with the man's passing. I honestly don't believe that. I am not a supporter of Hussein Dabo. Because of personality, to me, he's too Jawara-like. I see Usainu, and I see that Maniko, Maniko gentleman thing. I don't like any of that Maniko gentleman stuff. Because to me, it's like my grandma would say, if somebody kills your mom, if you see a red knoll, you run. The way he behaves, that this whole no problem, this Maniki gentleman, I don't like it, because Jawara caused disaster. I mean, we're still grappling with the disaster of Jawara's gentlemanly Maninka style. So when I look at Hussein, I see that, and it really, 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 really gives me a lot of pause. But the truth of the matter is, much of the vitriol that gets thrown at Dabo has nothing to do with what he's doing. Because what you have, if you look at Dabo, you look at his support base, you look at it, guess what? It's like a carbon copy of the PPP. So what you had was a lot of resentment that people had towards the PPP. Believe me, they never paused. They never missed a bit. The resentment that they had towards the PPP was exactly what they transferred towards Hussein Dabo. And the truth of the matter is, in Jawara's days, a lot of things they were saying, because they wanted to be okay with this and so on. Much of what they were saying was underground. Nowadays, they feel free because of the coverage that Yahya Jammeh is doing. The Yahya Jammeh has basically insulted them or inaugurated them against that. So a lot of things they say because Yahya has given them the green light. Yahya Jammeh, by repeating the things that they say about Maninka people privately, has basically legitimized what the feelings that they had that had nothing to do with reality. If you look at the structure of these parties, you are like, what is stopping these people from working together? If you look at the reality on the ground, nothing that is happening in Gambia today on the Yahya Jammeh is justified by anything that happened on the Jawara. Nothing. There's Jawara. I'm not a fan of Jawara, but you look at what the way he ran the country. There was a high degree of magnanimity that he exercised throughout his throughout his tenure. And so for us now, 50 years on, to be grappling with some of the things that Penjao spewed out into the political atmosphere decades ago is in so many ways a very sad thing.
So apparently, this appears to be the main reason why some of our compatriots just do not have the courage to say things for fear of being labeled or seen as either unpatriotic or tribalistic or being anti-government, while other groups does not want to jeopardize its staff of benevolence on whatever they think it fit. And take, for example, the diasporan smooth love affair with some former Gambian officers who dine and wine with Yahya Jammeh, and now they are coming out pretending to be our new saviors. This is the Cedar Jobs, the Yahya Jammehs, and you name them. I mean, and you have some decent people who are coming out to say, hey, look, in order for these so-called intellectual prostitutes who masturbate with the regime and, agree with him in everything when they were kicked out, we should tell them who they are and stop the habit of denial that has characterized our malfunctioning national life for so long. They call those people all sort of names in the cyber, like honestly, the Joe Sambus, the Lamendavos, the Yoro Jalos, the George Sar, who try to question why now these people are coming on board and try to remind them. Nobody is saying that, they shouldn't come on board. But to tell them who they are, to give, so that, we will not have a repeat of this kind of nonsense again. It bogs me. It bogs me, Saul. Gambians don't want to come to the reality that, this nonsense had to stop.
Yeah. Let me tell you, Mr. Silla, I am ideologically in line with all those brothers who are very skeptical, and this is to put it very mildly, who are very skeptical of Dr. Cedar Job or Amadou Jammeh. Amadou, my heart bleeds for Amadou. What happened to him is horrible, but here's the deal. What Amadou did in crossing over to Yahya Jammeh is a serious betrayal. Listen, Mr. Silla, this is a very serious business. Going against a dictator is a very serious business. Nobody has written a contract with you. But as a matured person, okay, if you are somebody who, through your writing, through what you say, you give me the impression that I can rely on you, as a comrade in a fight against the dictator. If you turn around, you do a 360 degrees on me, and you go to the side of that person, whether you were there fleetingly, whether for a day or 2 days or 2 months, you have basically betrayed the common bond that we share. This is what Amadou did. I feel for the brother, what he went through is a powerful witness to what happened. He has seen firsthand the cruelty of Yahya Jammeh. But before that, it was somebody who actually betrayed his comrades. Amadou was not an insignificant player in this anti-Jammeh movement. When he was one of the people that he never wrote like some of us. He never wrote copiously. He never wrote long essays on Jammeh or long articles like some of us do. But he always would write short, very succinct, critiques of the Jammeh regime. For instance, and I saw Joe Sam put this out. Joe Sam is right. God bless him. Joe was putting out some of the things that Amadou was writing back then. And that was Amadou, and I remember it very well. Amadou, he was the guy who was diagnosing the Jammeh's, musical chair syndrome. So he was the one who was saying this. And then when, Yahya Jammeh and his people, when they wanted to flip from a naked military junta, called AFPRC, they through the advice of people like Musa Abite, they dropped only a single left and became APRC. So the armed forces went out, but they called them Alliance for Patriotic Orientation. It's just a semantic. It's wordplay, but it's a powerful wordplay. They do that. So nomenclature has significance. And Amadou Jammeh was one of the people who actually took their APRC and turned it into aimless people ruining our country. I mean, when you read those things, you're like, yeah, he gets it. He gets it. So that goes on for a few years. And then you are there, sitting there, and all of a sudden somebody tells you, hey, wait a minute, your dad Kotoy is now the minister of this and that and that. And it's shocking. It's shocking, and you cannot, there is no way you cannot feel that you are personally betrayed by what Amadou did. And when he did it, it was very selfish. It had nothing to do with it. That was Amadou doing the thing. And of course, I listened to Amadou's interview where he was talking about how Demba Jaw and people like that can bear witness to what he was doing on the ground, trying to sabotage the Jammeh era and I think it's a bunch of baloney. Honestly, I think it's a bunch of baloney. I don't buy it. I feel for the brother. I think, unlike some of his critics, I don't think Amadou should keep quiet. I think because Amadou is powerful, but is a very powerful messenger. He has seen things that only some of us can only imagine. He has seen things that we only hear about. So, unlike most of the people who go through Yahya Jammeh's gulag, Amadou Jammeh actually has the power to write in clean language what he saw, what the place is like. So if for nothing else, I mean, he's a wonderful ambassador for the oppressed people in the country. But what he did, this flipping, going to Yahya Jammeh for, whether it's 18 months or 2 years or whatever he did there, or however long he stayed with them, will always be a mark against him, because it if anything, it reveals, in the minimum sense, it reveals somebody who, when it's convenient, would only think about himself. I mean, anybody who did what Amadou did could betray people in real substantive ways. It was a betrayal what he did, regardless of what Demba Jaw was and the other Tafa people, Tafa Sose and people like that he was listing as his. In fact,
Saul, I agree with you to an extent. I'm not suggesting that they should keep quiet, and I'm even aware that. Some of these former Jammeh officers, does deserve some compassion over their efforts so far to join the struggle in taking the country out of the woods. Yeah. But that sympathy should not obstruct a reasonable examination of relevant national, personal, and official behaviors and issues.
Yes.
So this is what I'm saying. Our habit of denial has for so long characterized, the national malfunction of our society.
Yes,
this is ridiculous. This is what should stop.
Yeah.
Because the call for a revolution of our national thought and psyche is not necessarily a regime change alone, but our attitudinal change also is a big component to the issue. Yeah. And the national aspirations and the realizing that for a crucial progress to be achieved, it should be the people who should will the governance and not the glory of individual politicians or the ponderous clap of so-called diasporan groups and there trying to glorify it and bring somebody as a savior to us. The ordinary truth is the Gambian people have a right to question these people,
yes.
Scrutinize them.
Yes.
You cannot come and say you're going to lead in our name without our consent. Yes. Gambia belongs to all of us.
Yes.
This is a democracy. Yes. You went and dined with this guy and you know how heinous, how treacherous Jammeh is. So when you come back, we will have to scrutinize you.
Yeah.
So those who do that, who does not just hypocritically keep quiet, but are trying to question these people, should not be seen as, these people don't want unity, we should now forget about that and then turn a new page. This is what has brought us to this nonsense.
Yes. I couldn't say it any better. I agree with you entirely. And that's the truth. Here's the deal. This is what I know about Gambians, and I'm not as old as you are, but this is what I know. If you honestly believe in a cause, you believe in whatever the topic is, and you know in your heart that the position that you have taken is conscientious and is the truth, my advice is just ignore what any other Gambian says, because for whatever reason, and my rule of thumb is 9 out of 10 Gambians are wrong 9 out of 10 times. So 90% of Gambian people are wrong 90% of the time on any single national issue. Just remember this. The same, a lot of these people that are now insulting people that would tell you this and that, these are the same people who were cheering and jumping up and down in 1997, somehow hoping, somehow believing that this nonsense Yahya Jammeh man who was doing nothing but setting them up was somehow going to turn the Gambia into Dubai. Okay? I remember people here, I swear to God, I remember people here in this country that I had serious arguments with. I was living in Silver Spring at the time. Had very, very heated arguments with about how much this man is going to destroy this country. And you are not going to believe how many times somebody has called me as a tribalist because and of course in that wink language where they don't tell you things directly, they suggest that somehow I don't want to see a Jola become the president of the country. And once I went to a Christian ceremony on 16th Street in Silver Spring, the high-rise building behind Summit Hills. I went there to somebody's naming ceremony, and we were sitting there, and I said this was just at the tail end of 1990s, and I said what we are doing is dangerous, and I say this election is coming. Then the election was literally like 2 weeks away. The 1996 election, and I said, we are always going to regret allowing this guy to turn himself into. And then somebody said, why did you say that? And I tried to break down what I honestly believe was going to happen, that this man was going to turn into a monster, and then will do horrible things because he doesn't have any knowledge. All he's doing, and like my point back then was, all this man did was to run to Gaddafi and other places and Korea and so on to get money, Taiwan to get money, and to rush and build just physical structures to make himself look like as a workaholic, somebody who is a no-nonsense, build, walk type. When all he's doing is actually not doing nothing but distracting people. Those were the times when Yahya Jammeh was saying that he really didn't want to be the president of the country. All he cared about is making sure that the country works. And of course, we all know that's nothing but nonsense. But on that occasion, let me tell you, Mr. Silla, I said this, and the guy that asked me the question why I said he was not him, he kept quiet when I said that. He said, But I went to the bathroom to use the bathroom. When I came out of the bathroom, you wouldn't believe it. This same guy, that was when I was there, he was just there. When I opened that bathroom, I heard this man talking about how people like me are the ones who are destroying the country. He said, honestly, I'm telling you, he said, this is why the country has never, because all they want, he said, all they want is to have only one tribe to rule the country. This is what, he was saying this thing. So I came out and I was looking at this. I was going to respond, but I looked and I'm like, no, don't. So what I did was after the thing was done, I just got my coat and I just got out. And I went. Because and today I see this brother. It's funny, in one of the protests the last protest that I attended against Yahya Jammeh, I saw that brother there. I looked at him and I went up to him and I asked him. And I said, so what? I said, so what do you think now? And he was acting like it. I said, no. And I reminded him. I said, back in 1996, I said, I was saying this asshole is going to destroy our country. This dumb ass Yahya Jammeh is going to destroy our country. And when I went, and I gave him this specific, and he was shocked that I remember that. I said, no, I will never forget what you were saying. I said, what do you think? And he said, you know me, I didn't understand, that time I was in blah, blah. And I said, okay. And that's your typical Gambian thing. So this attitude towards people who say uncomfortable truths is very widespread. It's not just about Amadou Jane and the Sidat Jobs, because Sidat especially is very interesting. You know my Fati, I know my Fati. Me and him were at the from the same time, and Mai has issues that really he needs to answer. That no question about that. But Mai, for all whatever false people see in him or whatever people have against him, Mai never worked for Yahya Jammeh. So hearing about the style, Sidat Job going after my Fati and trashing him and so on, and I'm like, Sidat needs to slow down. That old man needs to slow down. My Fati, you can say anything about him, but my Fati was not defending Yahya Jammeh. Sidat was doing that. Sidat was one of the people who were presenting this so-called gentle face of the Yahya Jammeh regime. He was one of the people who were going around basically giving people a load of crap around the world, a load of crap about how he's progressing and how he's doing this and how he's not the monster that he was when the kids were killed back in 2000. Sadat was there. I mean, so the idea that somebody who was a member of the inner circle of Yahya Jammeh for years, who perhaps contrary to his own better judgment, should never have allowed himself to serve this dictatorship, did so anyway. I mean, somebody like that ought to be very careful about the kind of stones he's throwing at other people. So
solving Gambia's problem is easy to my mind. Were it not for, these entrenched interests, including politicians and their consorts, embedded monopolies by some interests and public sectors whose very soul has been ripped out by ethno-political cannibals back home in the Gambia and even within the diasporan community here.
Yes.
And we can no longer decisively resist to discuss these, contradictions in national life.
Yes.
We have to come out and call a spade.
Yes.
In order to establish something very tangible, something very realistic, and try to take our country out of the woods. We should stop this hypocrisy now.
Yes. Yeah. The point is don't wait for anybody else to start it. You take your stand at the personal level and follow it through, and you'll be surprised that people that you never expect are actually watching or listening to you are actually doing so. Because one of the things that I find very encouraging is anytime I write quote unquote a controversial thing, the number of people that I meet or who send me an email to say, hey, thank you for saying this thing. Sometimes I'm really surprised from the kind of people who reach out to say, continue saying these sort of things or write these sort of things. And God knows that's not why I'm writing it. I just write it because I feel strongly about it. And that's my same attitude towards other issues that are of national interest. And part of it is, and this is very important, Mr. Silla. The first 6 years I was in this country, I was working in a grocery store, and you know this sort of thing and how it goes. I was doing back-breaking work at the grocery store, stocking shelves, and so I was doing a lot of manual things. I'll get home, I get so tired that I cannot even do anything. I'll just take a shower and just crash, and then the next day I have to get up and walk and rush to school, and so on and so on. I did that for 6 years, and my point is, I swear to God, I would rather go back and do that job again than lie in order to curry favor with Mr. Silla so he can give me a nice job, or a dictator, brutal barbaric dictator. I swear to God, I would rather go back tomorrow and walk back to my former employers, and have them employ me as a grocery stocker than be a miscommitted member. Under no circumstances will I will. So which is why one of the things that I don't know if you know this or whether you're on the list, and I say this publicly because there's nothing to hide there. I got a call just some weeks ago around the independence time it was Tijan's voicemail. It come from the Gambian American Association for Washington D.C. Inviting me to go to the independence celebration, and they said the keynote speaker is Dr. Suleiman Yang. They're going to give a lifetime award, a special award to some woman in Alexandria, Virginia, and the ambassador of Yahya Jammeh, this guy Alungom, is going to be the special guest or something. There was a title that he had. He was supposed to say something, and the first thing that struck me was, oh boy, how contradictory is this thing? How is this possible? Listen, Mr. Ngom, I don't know him at a personal level. He's probably a nice person. He's tried it. But here's the deal. He's a matured man. He's much older than me, because I remember him when I was going to school. So the man clearly is in his 60s now. If this matured person, this elderly Mr. Ngom, wants to be the messenger of a barbaric, brutal dictator like Yahya Jammeh, listen to me, Mr. Silla. I will never make Mr. Ngom feel that he's not doing something wrong. Okay? I am not going to say I'm going to walk to Mr. Ngom and say, hey, you need to be ashamed of what you're doing. You need to be ashamed of yourself. You need to go look for a different type of job. I will not do that. But I can tell you that I will not fed that man to make him feel okay with what he's doing. Let's face what he's doing. What he is doing, he is going around this country here to Congress, to lobby, to alter at the behest of Yahya Jammeh to try to prop up a man who has no business being in power. Yahya Jammeh is a brutal, barbaric dictator. Ali Ngom is his representative in America. And in a dictatorship like Yahya Jammeh, the only way you can survive is to be either chopping off the foot of your competitors or to basically be somebody who feeds him a lot of bullcrap, lies, or to tell him a bunch of nonsense to massage his ego, because, beneath everything else, beyond everything else, what you are dealing here is, in Yahya Jammeh is a man who is mature, who is little, who is petty, who doesn't know it much at all in his head, and who needs his ego to be stroked with lies and flattery and all kinds of nonsense. And for somebody in his regime to get a post as prestigious as the ambassador to the United States, you must be paying something. There's a price for that, I can tell you. Maybe this is not something you want to hear. Maybe this is not something your listeners don't want to hear. But let me tell you this. I am telling you for the record. That Gom guy must be, what the hell is he doing for Yahya Jammeh? For Yahya to reward him with this lucrative position. This is a prestigious position. What is he doing? So the Gambian people that are going to sit there to fight with this Gom guy, to have him, preside over this occasion, to be presenting him as the ambassador of Gambia, blah blah. He's not Gambia's ambassador. He's Yahya Jammeh's ambassador. Yahya Jammeh has no legitimacy. Neither does Mr. Gom.
Look, Saul.
Yeah.
I mean, aiding and abetting a criminal makes you a criminal equally.
Yes. Yes.
The Goms are the intellectual prostitutes, let's call them those names. These are the people who are keeping Jammeh in power.
Yeah.
These are the people who we should call them their proper names.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the hypocrisy, I'm telling you, which has now become a national pastime for we Gambians, even most of us in the diaspora here.
Yes, we are.
How can we liberate ourselves when we are dining and whining with people who, like Jammeh, who are part of the dictatorship clique?
Listen, Mr. Saul. When I actually called somebody. When I received that phone call and I heard this message about Ngom and the ambassador of the, I had immediately, I swear to God, I got angry, and I thought I could reply to the board. I could reply to the phone message immediately, but I couldn't do that. So I called actually a friend of mine, and I told him, and I said, "Did you receive them?" He said, "Yeah, it's okay." I said, "What do you think?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Listen to the damn message again and call me." So he called me back. He said, "Oh, they're just saying that." I said, "Are you okay with that?" He said, "Oh, but do you know how this works?" And what kills me is some of these very people who are organizing this thing, who are fighting Mr. Ngom, turn around and blast Yahya Jammeh. And I'm like, hello, how do you
reconcile those type of things?
That's my thing, Mr.
Seeing oranges and lemons together.
Yes. So my thing is, and I said, maybe there's something wrong with me that I have such a problem with this sort of thing. This, I swear to God, it really offended my sensibilities, to be honest with you. I thought about this and I said, oh my goodness, listen to me. If you're going to do this for tribal reasons or relatives or whatever it is, because many of the people that organize these so-called, so-called Gambian quote-unquote occasions here, they do many things out of ethnic reasons, and nobody talks about it. And of course, the organizers will hear this and they can respond. They can respond if they have an issue with it. But what you have there is, if you're going to invite this man and you're going to do it for your family relatives or nepotic reasons or whatever it is, tribal reasons, call it what it is. Stop calling it Gambia. Stop fronting as if you're speaking for the rest of us. That doesn't respect me. That doesn't represent me. When I listen to the minute I'm like, under no circumstance will I ever associate myself with that sort of nonsense. I mean, this is a man who is going around apologizing for Jammeh. This is a man who is going around to the United States, the important people in this government, in this country. going around presenting Jammeh as this benign leader who is doing a wonderful job in Canada. That's his job. That's how he maintains his job. So if you're taking somebody like that and you putting him on a pedestal and embracing him, and you turn around the very next day and insulting Yahya Jammeh for being a dictator and killing people and murdering and human sacrifice and all, well, what do you think you're doing?
You sit down and dine and wine with Jammeh's emissary.
Yeah. And this is my thing. So what I'm saying, like with the point that you raised about how we behave and the hypocrisy that this is so pervasive in the Gambian community that, but as I said, and I circle back to what I began with, the point is the few of us who are crazy enough to question this set of things should never shy away from saying so, because if you do, things will only get worse. And if we can, by some miracle, convince even a single person to see the light, to understand what we are saying, I think we are all the better off. Because otherwise, the Gambian cause is lost. What is happening in that country, in the Gambian community in the diaspora, you talk about the diaspora, in so many ways our problem is compounded by the diaspora, because Gambians in the diaspora are in so many ways worse off than Gambians in Gambia. We talk about lack of opportunities, educational opportunities, and so on and so on. Gambians in the diaspora are very divided. Many things center around tribal issues. Nobody talks about it, but it's clearly there. Because fundamentally beneath this Yahya Jammeh trouble is a fierce struggle. It's a fierce struggle for control of their country. People spin things, ton of things. Some people, for whatever reason, believe the rest of us are so dumb that we cannot see what they are doing. But this is basically what we have going on, and I agree with you entirely, Mr. Silla. This is stuff that people...
So, and you see, this Jammeh dictatorship remains the greatest obstacle to the restoration and renewal of the Gambian democratic process.
Yeah. Yes.
And to mine, I believe the shortest cost to its removal is the formation of the most, as I said, the most grandiose possible coalition of all parties with the exception of the APRC for its speedy defeat.
Yes.
But remember, let us remember, the purpose of such a coalition is not to maximize political chances of the opposition parties, but for the sole restoration of democracy, a formidable force for poverty reduction and national development. And it has to be based on realism, not ethnocentric groupings and some nonchalant interests here and there. It is time we start calling a spade and tell each other the truth. Let's bring the thing on the table and discuss. Let's get into a frank and realistic national dialogue.
Yes.
This is what the situation demands. This is what the time demands. Mr. Saidykhan, we are running out of time. We'll have part 2 of this discussion.
Yes.
This conversation will be an ongoing conversation because our country demands it, the time demands it. We cannot leave Gambia to be ruled by Jammeh like this. Our people need our intervention. We are going to do it for our children and for posterity and for ourselves. Thank you. It's a pleasure having you on board, and we hope you will come back. We continue this conversation. Listeners, you are listening to Kibare Radio. This is a Gambian Experience program. I was talking to Saul Saidykhan on the line from Virginia. The Gambian Experience is a program that comes to you on Kibaro Radio every Monday. I'm your presenter, Mr. Mohamed Lamin Silla. Mr. Saul Saidykhan, thank you for coming on board.
Thank you.